Jake Morrison watched the alien ships descend through Earth's atmosphere like deadly silver tears. The former Earth Defense Force captain gripped his rifle tighter as the massive vessels cast shadows over New Chicago. He had seen the reports, from London, Tokyo, and Sydney. Humanity's greatest cities had fallen in hours. "Captain, incoming transmission from command," his communications officer called out. The young soldier's voice cracked with fear. Jake pressed the comm button. Static filled the air before Admiral Brooks's voice came through. "All remaining units, this is High Command. Earth defense grid is offline. Repeat, the grid is down. All conventional weapons are non-functional. The enemy is using some kind of energy dampening field." The line went dead. Jake looked at his weapon. The advanced plasma rifle that had seemed so powerful yesterday now felt like a piece of expensive junk. Around him, his squadron of 20 soldiers waited for orders. These men and women had trained their entire lives to defend Earth. Now they watched helplessly as alien craft landed in the city square below. The ships were beautiful in a terrifying way. They moved without sound, their hulls reflecting light, like liquid mercury. As they touched down, sections of their surfaces simply faded away to reveal openings. No doors, no mechanical sounds. Just smooth transitions from solid to empty space. Creatures emerged from the ships. Jake had seen the intelligence reports, but seeing them in person was different. The Zephyrians stood 7 feet tall with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer. Their heads were larger than human heads, with big dark eyes that showed no emotion. They wore form-fitting suits that looked more grown than manufactured. "What are your orders, sir?" Sergeant Tony Rivera asked. The Marine had served with Jake for 3 years. He was tough, loyal, and never backed down from a fight. Jake watched as the aliens began setting up some kind of equipment in the square. Humans were running in all directions, but they moved strangely. Their movements were slow and clumsy, as if they were walking through thick water. "They're doing something to the civilians," Jake realized. Some kind of paralysis field. More alien ships arrived. These were larger, clearly designed for transport rather than combat. As Jake watched, the Zephyrians began herding humans toward these vessels. Men, women, and children walked in perfect lines, their faces blank and empty. "We have to do something," Amy Davis whispered. The young engineer had joined their unit just last month. She was smart, maybe too smart for her own good, but she had heart. Jake made his decision. "We go down there. Maybe our weapons don't work, but we can't just watch." They moved through the empty buildings toward the square. The city felt dead. Cars sat abandoned in the streets, their electronic systems fried by whatever the aliens were using. Even simple digital watches had stopped working. As they got closer, Jake could see the alien equipment more clearly. Strange devices hummed with energy, creating a field that seemed to make humans docile and compliant. But the aliens themselves moved freely, unaffected by their own technology. "Look at how they're sorting people," Amy pointed out. She was right. The Zephyrians were dividing humans into different groups. Young, healthy adults went to one ship. Children and elderly people went to another. Scientists and engineers, identified by their clothing or equipment, were separated into a third group. "They're not just taking people randomly," Jake realized. "They have a plan." Before they could get closer, a Zephyrian noticed their approach. The alien turned its large dark eyes toward them and made a sound that was not quite speech. Immediately, other aliens moved to surround Jake's squad. Jake tried to raise his weapon, but his arms felt like they were moving through thick mud. The paralysis field was affecting them now too. One by one, his soldiers collapsed to their knees, unable to move. The lead Zephyrian approached Jake. When it spoke, the words formed directly in his mind rather than through his ears. "You are Captain Jake Morrison, age 32, military background." The alien's mental voice was cold and clinical. "You will be classified as combat stock. Your resistance training makes you suitable for entertainment purposes." "Entertainment?" Jake struggled to speak through the paralysis. "Your species shows interesting aggressive behaviors under stress. This provides amusement for our citizens. You will be transported to Facility 77 Alpha for conditioning and preparation. Jake watched helplessly as Tony Rivera was also selected for the combat group. Amy Davis was marked for the engineering section, her technical skills apparently valuable to their captors. The rest of his squad was designated as general labor. As the aliens loaded them onto the transport ships, Jake caught sight of a woman being placed in the science group. She had short brown hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Even under the influence of the paralysis field, she was observing, analyzing, remembering. Her name tag read Dr. Lisa Grant, Biochemistry. The inside of the alien ship was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The walls seemed alive, pulsing gently with soft light. There were no seats or restraints. Humans simply stood where they were, placed held upright by the alien technology. As the ship lifted off, Jake felt Earth falling away beneath them. Through what might have been a window or might have been a screen, he watched his home planet shrink until it was just another point of light among the stars. A Zephyrian moved through the human cargo, examining each person like a farmer checking livestock. It paused in front of Jake. "Your species believes itself intelligent," the alien said directly into his mind. "You have primitive technology and aggressive tendencies. You will serve our empire well in your designated roles. Resistance is neither expected nor possible." But as Jake looked around at his fellow prisoners, he saw something the aliens had missed. Despite the paralysis field, despite their helpless situation, there was still something burning in human eyes. Fear, yes, but also anger. And underneath that anger, something much more dangerous. Hope. The aliens had made their first mistake. They thought they understood humans. They thought technology and overwhelming force would be enough to break the human spirit. They believed that taking away weapons and freedom would make humans into perfect slaves. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. As the transport ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying its human cargo toward an uncertain fate, Jake Morrison began to plan. He did not know how and he did not know when, but somehow, some way, humanity would find a way to fight back. The Zephyrians had caged the wrong species. The mining colony on Zerion 7 was a hellish place. Red dust filled the air constantly, and the twin suns beat down without mercy. Jake Morrison swung his primitive pickaxe at the crystal formations, each strike sending shockwaves through his already aching muscles. The Zephyrians had given them tools that belonged in a museum, claiming that manual labor built character and obedience. Around him, hundreds of other humans worked in similar conditions. They wore simple gray uniforms and had numbers tattooed on their arms. Jake was now prisoner 4429. The aliens had taken away their names along with everything else. "Keep working," the Zephyrian overseer commanded through the neural implants they had all received. The device felt like a constant pressure in the back of Jake's skull. It was supposed to prevent organized thinking and make rebellion impossible. But Jake had discovered something interesting about the implants. They worked perfectly when he thought about escape or fighting. The moment those ideas entered his mind, the device would send painful shocks. However, it seemed to ignore certain types of thoughts entirely. Jake began to hum an old song his grandfather had taught him, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot." It was a simple tune, one that helped keep rhythm while working. Other prisoners began to hum along. The overseers paid no attention. Music was harmless, after all. What the aliens did not realize was that the song contained a pattern, 3 short notes followed by 2 long ones, then a pause. Jake was sending a message to anyone smart enough to recognize it. The same Morse code his grandfather had used in the old wars on Earth. 300 miles away, Dr. Lisa Grant sat in a sterile white room while Zephyrian scientists ran tests on her. They were studying human stress responses, trying to understand what made people break under pressure. They would show her images of terrible things or play sounds designed to cause fear, then measure her biological reactions. Lisa had learned to control her responses. She breathed slowly and thought about calm things while they tortured her mind. But she was also learning about them. The Zephyrians were incredibly smart, but they thought in straight lines. They expected logical responses to logical stimuli. Subject 7832 shows unusual resistance to fear conditioning, one alien noted. To another, They spoke in their own language, but the neural implants translated everything automatically. Perhaps we should increase the intensity, the other suggested. Lisa almost smiled. They were trying to break her spirit, but instead they were teaching her exactly how their technology worked. Every sensor they used, every measurement they took, every reaction they expected, she was building a complete picture of their methods. During the rest periods, she would tap Morse code against the wall of her cell. The same pattern Jake was humming in the mines. 3 short, 2 long pause. She had no idea if anyone could hear her, but she had to try. On the arena world of Nelvara, Tony Rivera stood in a pit surrounded by cheering aliens. The gladiatorial combat was their idea of entertainment. Humans fighting each other or alien beasts while Zephyrian citizens placed bets on the outcomes. Tony had won 17 fights so far. Each victory earned him better food and a softer bed, but also meant facing stronger opponents. The aliens thought they were breaking down human morality by making people fight for survival. They believed it would turn humans against each other. They were wrong. Tony had quickly figured out how to communicate with other fighters. During the brief moments when they grappled or stood close together, they would whisper information. Who was hurt and needed an easier opponent? Which guards could be bribed? Where the weapon storage areas were located? The aliens saw only violence and competition. They missed the subtle cooperation happening right under their noses. Fighters would deliberately lose matches to protect injured comrades. They shared information about alien weaknesses observed during training. Most importantly, they were learning advanced combat techniques that their captors thought were too primitive to matter. Human 6251, you will face the Kralix beast today, announced the arena master. Tony had seen this creature before. It was 10 feet tall with 4 arms and natural armor plating. 3 humans had already died fighting it, but Tony had a plan. Meanwhile, at Engineering Facility Omega, Amy Davis crawled through a maintenance shaft, pretending to repair a ventilation system. What she was actually doing was far more important. She was mapping the alien computer networks and learning how their technology really worked. The Zephyrians had made a critical error. They assumed that human engineering knowledge was too primitive to understand their advanced systems, so they gave human workers access to maintain basic functions without worrying about security. Amy had always been good with computers and machines. Now she was getting an education in technology that was centuries ahead of anything on Earth. The aliens used quantum processors and neural networks that could think and adapt, but they had built-in limitations, safety protocols that prevented certain actions, logical barriers that made some solutions impossible to consider. Amy was beginning to understand that these limitations were also weaknesses. She had found a way to access the communication systems without triggering security alerts. By routing through maintenance channels and using error-checking protocols, she could send tiny bits of data throughout the alien network. Nothing big enough to be noticed, but enough to carry simple messages. 3 short pulses, 2 long pulses, pause. The same pattern that Jake hummed and Lisa tapped. Amy was broadcasting it through every alien facility that had human prisoners. Slowly, carefully, a network was forming. In his cell each night, Jake would lie on his simple cot and think about his situation. The neural implant prevented him from planning escape directly, but it could not stop him from remembering old military strategies, code words and communication methods, the importance of patience and timing. The aliens believed they had complete control. They saw humans as predictable animals that could be trained and managed. They thought superior technology made them invincible, but Jake remembered something his drill sergeant had said years ago. The enemy's greatest weakness is always their greatest strength taken too far. The Zephyrians' greatest strength was their logical, systematic approach to everything. They had protocols for every situation and technology to solve every problem. This same systematic thinking was also their greatest weakness. They could not imagine solutions that fell outside their established parameters. As Jake drifted off to sleep, he smiled slightly. 3 short, 2 long, pause. The message was spreading. Soon, very soon, the aliens would discover that caging humans was like trying to hold lightning in a bottle. The storm was coming, and the Zephyrians had no idea what they had unleashed. Across the galaxy, in dozens of facilities, thousands of humans were beginning to hear the same rhythm. In work songs and wall taps, in equipment sounds and breathing patterns, the message spread. It said something very simple, but very powerful. Humans were not broken. Humans were not beaten. And humans were definitely not going to stay caged forever. Dr. Lisa Grant had been pretending to be broken for 3 months. Every day she sat quietly while the Zephyrian scientists ran their tests. She answered their questions with simple responses and showed them exactly the fear and despair they expected to see. But inside her cell at night, she was conducting her own experiments. The aliens had made a critical mistake. They had given her access to basic hygiene supplies and simple food. What they did not realize was that a biochemist could turn almost anything into useful chemicals. Soap contained fats that could be broken down. Food additives could be concentrated and purified. Even the cleaning solution used on her cell floor had interesting properties. Lisa had been building a small laboratory in her soap dispenser. Drop by drop, she was creating a compound that could temporarily disrupt the neural implants. She had tested it on herself in tiny doses, carefully noting the effects. For approximately 7 minutes, the implant would go offline, allowing clear thought without painful shocks. During one of these brief windows of freedom, she had tapped out a new message on her cell wall. Not just the simple rhythm that Jake had started, but actual words in Morse code. Network forming. Pass the word. Day 127 dawn. 3 facilities away, Amy Davis had been having her own breakthrough. Her work in the alien computer systems had revealed something incredible. The Zephyrians did not just use quantum entanglement for faster-than-light communication. They used it for everything. Every facility, every ship, every piece of important equipment was connected through quantum links that could not be jammed or interrupted. The aliens thought this made their systems perfectly secure. After all, who could possibly understand quantum mechanics well enough to hack it? But Amy was learning that their quantum network had a flaw. It was designed to be so secure that it did not have proper filters for data that looked like normal system functions. Amy had figured out how to inject her own code into routine maintenance reports. The alien computers would automatically forward these reports throughout the network without checking the content. She was essentially using their own security system against them. Her first real message had been simple. Engineering facility. Online. Ready for coordination. Reply with status. The response had come from places she never expected. The mining colonies, the research stations, even the combat arenas. Humans everywhere were finding ways to communicate despite the alien control systems. On Zerion 7, Jake Morrison had become something like an unofficial leader among the miners. The aliens saw him as a model prisoner who had accepted his fate. He worked hard, followed orders, and never caused trouble. But during lunch breaks, Jake would sit with different groups of prisoners and share stories from Earth. These stories seemed harmless to the overseers. Humans talking about their past lives was actually encouraged, as it supposedly helped them, except that those lives were over. What the aliens missed was that Jake's stories contained detailed information about military tactics, resistance strategies, and coordination methods. When Jake told the story of the Great Chicago Fire, he was really explaining how to create diversions and coordinate simultaneous actions. His tale about building the railroad was actually a lesson in how to move people and supplies secretly. Every story had a double meaning that the humans understood, but the aliens ignored. The mining facility had become a training ground. Humans were learning to work together in ways that looked like normal labor, but were actually complex military exercises. They practiced moving in formation while pretending to transport equipment. They developed hand signals disguised as work gestures. Most importantly, they were identifying humans with special skills and making sure those people could communicate with each other. Jake had identified at least 12 former soldiers, 6 engineers, 3 doctors, and 1 former intelligence officer among the miners. Each of these people was quietly building their own sub-network within the larger group. Meanwhile, Tony Rivera was turning the gladiatorial arena into a combat training academy. The aliens thought they were watching humans fight for their amusement. But something much more sophisticated was happening in that pit. Tony had developed an entire system of combat moves that looked like individual fighting, but were actually team coordination drills. When two humans fought, they were really practicing how to work together against a common enemy. Every punch, kick, and grapple was teaching them something about alien anatomy and weaknesses. The Zephyrians had made the mistake of letting humans study their technology up close. The weapons in the arena, the force fields, the medical equipment used to heal fighters between matches, all of it was providing valuable intelligence about alien capabilities and limitations. Tony had also discovered something important about alien psychology. The Zephyrians could not understand the concept of losing on purpose to achieve a larger goal. When a human deliberately lost a fight, the aliens saw it as weakness or giving up. They never considered that it might be strategic. This blind spot was becoming the foundation of human resistance planning. The breakthrough came when Amy finally managed to establish real-time communication between all the facilities. She had built a hidden network inside the alien system that let humans send detailed messages instantly across the galaxy. The first coordinated conversation involved Jake from the mines, Lisa from the research station, Tony from the arena, and dozens of other humans from facilities across Zephyrian space. For the first time since the capture, humans could really talk to each other. Status report. Jake's message appeared on Amy's hidden communication system. Research facility has 847 humans. Guards number approximately 30. I have working knowledge of control systems and temporary implant disruptor, Lisa responded. Arena complex holds 312 fighters plus 200 support personnel. Full intelligence on alien combat capabilities and psychology, Tony added. Engineering facility has access to transportation, weapons manufacturing, and computer networks. Can coordinate. Simultaneous actions, Amy reported. Similar reports came from mining colonies, breeding facilities, research stations, and arena worlds throughout the Empire. The network now included over 15,000 humans across 47 different facilities. But the most important discovery came from an unexpected source. A group of humans in a biological research facility had been studying alien DNA samples. They had found something that changed everything. The Zephyrians have a genetic flaw, Dr. Robert Kim reported from his laboratory prison. Their brains cannot process certain types of chaotic or illogical information. When confronted with something that does not fit their understanding of how things should work, they literally cannot think about it properly. It causes a kind of mental paralysis. This information spread through the human network like wildfire. Every facility began testing the theory in small ways. Humans would do things that made no logical sense but somehow worked. The aliens would see these actions, but their minds would essentially skip over them, unable to process the impossibility. Jake organized a test in the mines. During the lunch break, he had prisoners form a circle and pass rocks in a pattern that violated basic efficiency principles. It served no logical purpose and wasted time and energy. The Zephyrian overseers looked directly at this activity but somehow did not really see it. Their reports at the end of the day made no mention of it at all. We found their weakness, Jake broadcast to the network that night. They cannot understand or remember things that do not make sense to them. We can hide our activities in plain sight as long as we make them illogical enough. Lisa began developing what she called chaos compounds, chemical mixtures that worked despite violating known science. Amy started writing computer code that accomplished its goals through methods that should not function. Tony developed fighting, techniques that broke every rule of physics but somehow succeeded anyway. Across the human network, the same message was spreading. Chaos is a ladder. The aliens had captured humanity thinking they understood human nature. They believed that logical creatures with superior technology could easily control illogical primitives with inferior tools. They were about to learn that sometimes the impossible is just waiting for someone crazy enough to try it. Operation Wildcard was beginning to take shape. And when it launched, the Zephyrian Empire would discover that their greatest mistake was not capturing humans. Their greatest mistake was giving humans time to get creative. Amy Davis stared at the alien computer terminal, her fingers dancing across the quantum interface with practiced skill. Around her, the engineering facility hummed with its usual activity as other human prisoners performed their assigned maintenance tasks. None of the Zephyrian supervisors suspected that their most trusted human worker was about to bring down their entire security network. The plan had taken 6 months to coordinate across 47 facilities. Every human in the network knew their role. Every detail had been rehearsed until it became second nature. But the most beautiful part of Operation Wildcard was that none of it should actually work. Amy took a deep breath and began typing the command sequence that would broadcast her message across the entire Zephyrian quantum network. The message was simple. Chaos is a ladder. At that exact moment across the galaxy, 15,000 humans began doing impossible things. On Zerion 7, Jake Morrison looked at the primitive pickaxe in his hands and smiled. According to physics, what he was about to do was completely impossible. The mining equipment was designed to extract crystals slowly and safely, but Jake had spent months figuring out how to make it do something entirely different. Now, he whispered to the miners around him. In perfect synchronization, 300 humans struck the crystal formations in a specific pattern that created a resonance frequency. The mining tools were not designed for this. The crystals were not supposed to respond this way. The entire setup violated every principle of safe excavation. But it worked. The resonance effect turned the entire mining complex into a massive seismic weapon. Underground tunnels that had taken years to dig suddenly expanded into vast caverns. The vibrations traveled through the planet's crust and emerged at exactly the right locations to bring down the guard towers and disable the facility's power grid. The Zephyrian overseers stood in shock as their perfectly planned mining operation transformed into something that defied understanding. Their minds literally could not process what they were seeing. As Dr. Kim had predicted, the aliens' genetic flaw made them mentally freeze when confronted with the impossible. Jake and his fellow miners were already moving to the next phase. They had turned their excavation equipment into weapons that should not exist, and were using mining tunnels as tactical corridors that violated every principle of military engineering. Meanwhile, at the research facility, Dr. Lisa Grant injected herself with the chaos compound she had spent months perfecting. The mixture should have killed her instantly. It contained chemicals that were toxic to human biology and combined elements that were supposed to neutralize each other. Instead, it gave her exactly 7 minutes of superhuman mental clarity while completely shutting down her neural implant. Test. Subjects, you are ordered to return to your cells immediately, a Zephyrian scientist commanded as alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Lisa looked at the alien with clear, uncontrolled eyes for the first time in months. No, she said simply. The word hit the alien like a physical blow. According to every protocol in their database, humans under neural control could not refuse direct orders. It was psychologically and technologically impossible. The scientist's mind struggled to process this contradiction while Lisa calmly walked to the chemical storage area. Other test subjects were injecting themselves with similar compounds. Each human was using a different mixture, all of them impossibly dangerous, all of them somehow working perfectly. Within minutes, every human in the research facility was free of mental control and armed with scientific knowledge that their captors had inadvertently taught them. The research station's own laboratories became weapons factories as humans began producing compounds that violated chemistry textbooks but achieved devastating results. At the gladiatorial arena on Nelvara, Tony Rivera stood in the fighting pit holding 2 weapons that should never be used together. In his left hand was a Zephyrian energy blade designed for precision cutting. In his right hand was a primitive human club made from scrap metal. Begin combat, the arena master announced, expecting another routine fight for alien entertainment. Tony threw the energy blade aside and charged the alien beast with nothing but the crude club. Every principle of combat said this was suicide. The weapon was inferior, the opponent was stronger, and the tactic was completely insane. The club struck the creature's armored hide and somehow triggered a cascade reaction in the beast's nervous system. The precise impact point, calculated through months of careful observation, caused the alien biology to essentially shut itself down. But Tony was not finished. As other human fighters began their own impossible victories, he turned his attention to the arena's defensive systems. The force fields that kept spectators safe from the violence were quantum-based barriers that could not be breached by physical force. Tony began hitting the force field generators with his primitive club. According to physics, this should accomplish nothing except breaking his weapon. Instead, the crude impacts created harmonic vibrations that caused the sophisticated quantum systems to malfunction in ways their designers never anticipated. The arena's barriers collapsed, and suddenly the Zephyrian spectators found themselves face to face with very angry human gladiators, who were no longer interested in entertaining their captors. Amy's engineering facility became the coordination center for the entire operation. As reports flooded in from across the galaxy, she realized that the breakout was succeeding beyond their wildest hopes. Not only were humans escaping from their prisons, they were actually capturing alien technology and turning it against their former captors. The Zephyrians' response was swift but predictable. Reinforcement fleets launched from military bases throughout the Empire. Command centers activated emergency protocols. The aliens followed every procedure in their extensive playbooks for dealing with prisoner uprisings. But their playbooks had been written for logical, predictable rebellions. They had contingencies for desperate escape attempts, coordinated resistance movements, and even full-scale prison riots. They did not have protocols for humans who used chaos as a weapon. The turning point came when the main detention facility, a massive space station that held over 10,000 human prisoners, became the target of the largest Zephyrian response force. 3 battle fleets converged on the station, expecting to find a standard hostage situation that could be resolved through superior firepower. Instead, they found that humans had somehow converted the station's containment field generators into the galaxy's largest electromagnetic pulse weapon. Amy had explained the process to Jake during their final planning session, but even she was not entirely sure how it worked. "We're going to take the fields that keep us trapped and turn them inside out," she had said. "Physics says it's impossible, but human engineering says impossible just means we haven't tried hard enough." When the Zephyrian fleets arrived, they were greeted by an energy discharge that fried every electronic system within 50,000 kilometers. Ships that had dominated space for centuries suddenly became powerless hulks drifting in the void. The sight of their invincible navy floating helplessly in space caused something like panic among Zephyrian command. For the first time in their recorded history, their technology had failed them completely. But the humans were just getting started. As the electromagnetic pulse faded, the detention station itself began to move. Humans had figured out how to turn the entire facility into a giant spacecraft, using nothing but modified life support systems and gravity generators. The massive structure, never designed for mobility, began accelerating toward the nearest Zephyrian colony world. Across the Empire, similar scenes were playing out. Humans were not just escaping their prisons, they were stealing alien technology, liberating other prisoners, and building an impossible fleet of improvised warships. The Zephyrians' greatest strength, their logical, systematic approach to every problem, had become their greatest weakness. They simply could not adapt fast enough to counter enemies who refused to follow any rules. By the end of the day that would later be known as Liberation Day, nearly 60% of imprisoned humans had escaped. More importantly, they had proven something that would reshape the galaxy forever. No cage could hold the human spirit. No matter how advanced the technology or how overwhelming the odds, humans would always find a way to turn the impossible into the inevitable. The Zephyrian Empire had captured what they thought were primitive animals. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. They had awakened human creativity. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberation ship Defiance, watching Zephyrian Prime grow larger on the main screen. The former mining prisoner now commanded a fleet of impossible vessels that had been cobbled together from stolen alien technology and human ingenuity. Each ship in his fleet was unique, built from whatever materials the escaped humans could find and powered by engineering principles that made alien scientists weep with confusion. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from 6 more Zephyrian colonies," reported his communications officer Lisa Grant. The former test subject had become his chief science advisor, and had spent the past year developing weapons that worked by violating known physics. How many does that make? Jake asked. 47 systems have surrendered in the past month, Amy Davis answered from her engineering station. The Zephyrian Empire has lost control of nearly half their territory. Jake nodded grimly. The war had raged for 3 years since Liberation Day, and the humans had won almost every engagement. Not because they had better weapons or superior numbers, but because they fought in ways the aliens simply could not counter. The human liberation fleet had grown from a few thousand escaped prisoners to a force that included millions of aliens from other species who had joined the rebellion. The Zephyrians had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten how many civilizations they had enslaved. When those civilizations saw humans successfully fighting back, they had found their own courage to resist. Sir, incoming transmission. From Zephyrian High Command, Lisa announced. Put them through. The main screen shifted to show a group of tall, pale aliens standing in what was clearly a command center. Jake recognized the lead figure as High Administrator Veltar, the alien who had personally overseen the invasion of Earth. Admiral Morrison. The alien's mental voice was strained with exhaustion and something that might have been fear. The High Council wishes to discuss terms. Terms? Jake leaned back in his command chair. 3 years ago, you told me that resistance was neither expected nor possible. What changed? Veltar's large, dark eyes seemed to focus somewhere beyond the screen. Your species. You do not fight as our simulations predicted. Our strategic computers cannot model your behaviors. Our weapons cannot counter your tactics. You create solutions that should not exist. Jake smiled grimly. That's because you still don't understand us. You tried to cage the one species in the galaxy that sees cages as puzzles to be solved. We propose a return to the previous arrangement, Veltar continued. We will relocate your people to a suitable world where you can live freely, and in return you will cease these attacks on our empire. The bridge fell silent. Jake looked around at his crew, humans, yes, but also freed slaves from a dozen different alien species. All of them waited for his response. Counter-proposal, Jake said finally. Complete freedom for every enslaved being in your empire. Reparations for the civilizations you've destroyed. And a new galactic government where no species rules over another. Impossible, Veltar responded immediately. The Empire has maintained order for 10,000 years. Without our guidance, the galaxy would fall into chaos. Chaos, Amy said quietly from her station, is a ladder. On the screen, the Zephyrian administrator visibly flinched at those words. The phrase had become the rallying cry of the liberation forces, and hearing it always triggered the alien's psychological response to impossible events. You have 1 hour to consider our terms, Jake announced. After that, we proceed with the liberation of Zephyrian Prime. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in thoughtful silence. Think they'll accept? Tony Rivera asked. The former. Gladiator now served as Jake's tactical advisor and had developed combat strategies that made enemy commanders resign in frustration. No, Jake replied. They can't. Their entire identity is built on being superior to everyone else. Admitting they're wrong would destroy everything they believe about themselves. He was right. 57 minutes later, Zephyrian defense fleets began moving to intercept the human ships. The aliens were making their final stand at their home world, using every advanced weapon and defensive system in their arsenal. It was exactly what Jake had hoped they would do. Begin Operation Checkmate, he ordered. What followed was not a traditional space battle. Instead of engaging the alien fleets directly, the human ships split up and began doing things that violated every principle of space combat. Some ships flew directly into the planet's atmosphere without heat shields. Others began mining asteroids in the middle of the battle. Several vessels started broadcasting music at frequencies that interfered with Zephyrian communication systems. The aliens tried to respond according to their military protocols, but every countermeasure they attempted was met by human tactics that made no sense. Ships that should have been destroyed by atmospheric entry instead used the planet's gravity well to slingshot around to unexpected positions. The asteroid mining operations somehow created debris fields that channeled enemy fire away from human vessels. The musical broadcast turned out to be complex mathematical sequences that caused alien computers to overload while trying to decode them. But the real masterstroke came when Amy activated the secret weapon she had been building for months. Hidden inside seemingly random pieces of space debris, she had constructed a network of quantum transmitters powered by scavenged alien technology. When activated, these transmitters hijacked the Zephyrian quantum communication network and broadcast a single message to every alien in the Empire simultaneously. The message was simple but devastating. Complete technical specifications for human impossible technology, along with detailed proofs showing that everything humans had accomplished was perfectly logical and scientifically sound. The effect on the Zephyrian psyche was catastrophic. For 3 years, their minds had been protected by their inability to understand human methods. The genetic flaw that prevented them from processing illogical information had shielded them from the full horror of their situation. Now, suddenly, they could see exactly how humans had been defeating them. Every impossible victory was revealed to be the result of superior thinking and creative problem-solving. The primitive species they had captured and enslaved was actually far more advanced than them in the ways that truly mattered. The realization swept through the Zephyrian Empire. Like a plague, military commanders abandoned their posts, scientists destroyed their own research, citizens demanded to know why their leaders had provoked a species that could rewrite the laws of physics. On Zephyrian Prime, High Administrator Veltar sat in his command chamber as reports of surrender flooded in from across the Empire. The greatest military force in galactic history was collapsing not from external attack, but from internal revelation. "Sir," his aide reported with a trembling mental voice, "Admiral Morrison is requesting permission to land. He says he wishes to discuss the future." Veltar nodded slowly. The war was over. The empire that had ruled for 10 millennia had been brought down by the one thing they had never learned to fight: creative thinking. Hours later, Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of the Zephyrian government complex. The halls that had once echoed with the commands of galactic overlords were now filled with defeated aliens who could barely look at their former slaves. In the main council chamber, representatives from hundreds of liberated species were gathering to establish a new form of galactic government. The Galactic Liberation Council would be based on cooperation rather than domination, with every species having an equal voice in their shared future. Jake found Veltar standing alone in what had been the Emperor's private office, staring out at the stars. "Your people will be treated fairly," Jake said quietly. "We're not interested in revenge, we just want to make sure this never happens again." The former High Administrator turned to face him. "How?" he asked. "How did your species become so advanced while appearing so primitive?" Jake considered the question. "We learned something your people never did. The universe doesn't care about what's supposed to be impossible. It only cares about what actually works. You spent so much time following rules that you forgot the most important rule of all. Which is? There are no rules. There are only consequences." As Jake left the office to join the council session, he paused at one of the large windows overlooking the capital city. In the distance, he could see construction crews made up of humans and aliens working together to repair damage from the war. Former enemies were sharing knowledge and building something new. The Zephyrians had tried to cage humanity, believing that superior technology and overwhelming force could control any species. They had learned too late that the most dangerous thing in the universe was not a weapon or a warship. The most dangerous thing in the universe was a species that refused to accept limitations. Years later, Amy Davis would become the first human director of the Galactic Technology Council. In her inaugural speech, she would sum up the lesson of the Liberation War in simple terms. "We didn't win because we were stronger or smarter than our enemies. We won because when they told us something was impossible, we heard it as a challenge. When they built cages to hold us, we turned them into launching platforms. When they tried to break our spirits, we turned our